What happens when a doctor begins to believe that money is more valuable than the lives of the people sitting in front of him? Fireside family. Our elders often say that life has a strange way of changing people's positions. Today, you may be the one everyone is begging. Tomorrow, you may become the one doing the begging. Many people hear that saying. Very few believe it. Until life decides to prove it. Tonight, I want to tell you the story of a man whose hands had saved countless lives. A man respected across the country. A man whose intelligence no one questioned. But somewhere along the journey, he lost something far more valuable than his medical knowledge. He lost his compassion. People called him one of the finest surgeons in Port Harcourt. Politicians trusted him. Business executives flew in from different parts of Nigeria just to have him perform their surgeries. His hospital was beautiful. The floors sparkled. The equipment was among the best money could buy. Everything about LifeSpring Specialist Hospital spoke of excellence. Except one thing. Mercy. Because if you walked into that hospital without money, many believed you had already taken your first step toward death. Some people even had a saying. If you don't have cash, don't waste your strength going to LifeSpring. Whether that saying was fair or not. Well, by the end of tonight's story, you will decide for yourself. Now, let's go back to the afternoon that changed everything. The rain had refused to stop since morning. Cars struggled through flooded roads. Motorcyclists hid beneath petrol station canopies. Street traders hurried to cover their goods with nylon sheets. Inside LifeSpring Specialist Hospital, patients sat quietly in the waiting room, hoping the weather would improve before it was time to go home. Some stared at their phones. Others watched the rain through the large glass windows. It was an ordinary afternoon. Until the hospital's automatic doors suddenly flew open. A woman stumbled inside. She wasn't walking. She was running. Or perhaps, she was running out of time. Wrapped tightly against her chest was a little boy covered with a soaked Ankara cloth. His small body looked frighteningly still. Water dripped from the woman's clothes, leaving a trail across the polished floor. Please. Her voice cracked before she reached the reception desk. Please, somebody help my son. Immediately, everyone in the waiting room turned toward her. One elderly man stood up. A young pregnant woman covered her mouth. Even a little girl waiting with her father stopped playing with her doll. Something was terribly wrong. The child couldn't have been more than 7 years old. His eyes were half closed. His tiny chest struggled to rise with every painful breath. His lips had begun turning pale. The woman held him tighter as though she could somehow keep him alive by refusing to let go. My son has been burning with fever since yesterday, she cried. He suddenly stopped talking. Please. I think he's dying. Her voice broke into uncontrollable sobs. Without caring who was watching, she dropped to her knees. Right there on the hospital floor. I don't have the money today, she said between tears. But I swear before God, I will pay. I sell vegetables in my one market. I'll pay little by little. Even if it takes me 1 whole year. Please. Don't let my son die. For a moment. Silence filled the waiting room. Not because people didn't care, but because many of them already knew what was coming. They had heard the stories. Some had witnessed them. Others had barely escaped becoming part of them. The receptionist looked at the woman with pity. Then lowered her eyes. Madam, you'll have to make the admission deposit first. The woman blinked in disbelief. My son can't breathe. I understand. But that's the hospital policy. The mother's voice became louder. Please look at him. He's dying. I'll bring the money. I promise. The receptionist swallowed hard. She wanted to help. It showed on her face. But fear showed too. Fear of breaking the rules. Just then, Nurse Ada hurried over. The moment she looked at the little boy, her expression changed. She gently touched his forehead. The heat almost made her pull her hand back. She checked his pulse. Then his breathing. Her heart sank. She looked toward the emergency ward. Then back at the receptionist. This child needs treatment now. Immediately. Before either of them could move. The sound of footsteps echoed through the hallway. Slow. Confident. Measured. Everyone instinctively turned. A tall man in a perfectly pressed white coat walked toward them. His expensive wristwatch caught the light. His polished shoes barely made a sound against the floor. Conversation stopped. Even the nurses stood straighter. Dr. Tunde Afolayan had arrived. The owner of LifeSpring Specialist Hospital. The man newspapers called a medical genius. The surgeon whose appointments were booked months in advance. To many people, he was a brilliant doctor. To many others, he was a man whose heart had become colder than steel. He stopped beside Nurse Ada. His eyes moved briefly toward the child. What's happening? Ada answered quickly. High fever. Difficulty breathing. I suspect severe malaria with complications. We need to move fast. Tunde nodded once. Then asked only one question. Has payment been made? The waiting room became so quiet. You could hear the rain beating against the windows. The mother crawled toward him on her knees. Doctor. She held onto the edge of his white coat. Please. I'll pay. I swear on everything I have. My son is all I have left. Please don't let him die. Dr. Tunde slowly looked down at her trembling hands. Then gently removed them from his coat. His face showed no anger. No sympathy. Only calm. The admission deposit. The receptionist shook her head. No, sir. Tunde looked at the mother. I'm sorry. We cannot admit patients without payment. Nurse Ada stepped forward immediately. Sir. The boy may not survive another hour. Tunde's expression did not change. This is a private hospital. Not a charity organization. The little boy suddenly began convulsing violently. His mother screamed. People rushed forward. One elderly man shouted. Doctor, please. Another woman began crying. Nurse Ada instinctively moved toward the child. But she stopped. Waiting. Because one word from Dr. Tunde was all it would take. He looked at the boy for a brief second. Then said quietly. Transfer them to the general hospital. Ada stared at him. Sir. The roads are flooded. They may never get there in time. For the first time. Something flickered across Dr. Tunde's face. A moment. A tiny moment. As though a battle had started somewhere deep inside him. But just as quickly, it disappeared. His voice became firm again. That is not my responsibility. Without another word, he turned around and walked away. Behind him, a mother's cries echoed through the hospital. The kind of cries that make strangers lower their heads because the pain is simply too much to watch. 20 minutes later, the little boy took his final breath. Still resting in his mother's arms. Still waiting for the treatment that never came. Outside, the rain continued to fall. And with it, whispers began spreading across Port Harcourt. They say another child has died at LifeSpring. That doctor has no heart. Money has become his god. No one remains like this forever. Because life has a way of visiting every house. Even the houses built with wealth. Even the men who believe tragedy only belongs to other people. And somewhere inside his luxurious office, As Dr. Ton poured himself a glass of expensive whiskey, he had no idea that life had already started writing the next chapter of his own story. A chapter that would force him to stand exactly where that grieving mother had knelt. And on that day, money would suddenly become the least important thing in the world. Fireside family. Have you ever noticed that not everyone who grows up in pain becomes kind? Some people carry their pain like a lantern, using it to light the way for others. But some carry it like a weapon, and before they realize it, they begin hurting innocent people with wounds they never caused. Dr. Tunde Afolayan wasn't born with a hard heart. Life didn't meet him that way. It made him that way. Or at least, that was what he kept telling himself. Long before the expensive hospital. Before television interviews. Before luxury cars lined up in his compound. Before people addressed him as Dr. Afolayan with admiration in their voices. He was simply Tunde. A skinny village boy from Osun State. The kind of boy whose school sandals had been repaired so many times that no one could remember their original color. His mother sold roasted corn by the roadside. His father was a farmer. Not because farming made money, but because it was all he knew. Some days, there was enough food to eat. Other days, his mother would smile and tell him she wasn't hungry. It took years before Tunde realized she had been lying. She simply wanted him to have the last portion of food. One memory followed him everywhere. Even after he became rich. Even after he built his hospital. He could never escape it. He was only 12 years old when his father became seriously ill. At first, everyone thought it was an ordinary cough. Then the coughing became worse. Soon, his father could barely stand. His breathing sounded like someone struggling beneath heavy stones. His mother borrowed money from neighbors. Sold her only gold earrings. Even their small piece of farmland was mortgaged. Still, it wasn't enough. She took her husband to a private hospital. Tunde remembered every detail of that day. The smell of disinfectant. The crowded reception. His mother's trembling hands. He remembered her crying before the doctor. Please. My husband needs help. I'll pay. Give me time. The doctor barely looked at them. No payment. No treatment. Just like that. As if he were discussing the weather. Not a human life. They carried his father home. 3 days later. He died. That night. Tunde sat outside their mud house. Looking up at the stars. His mother's crying filled the darkness. He clenched his tiny fist until his fingernails dug into his palms. Then he made himself a promise. A promise that would shape the rest of his life. I will never be poor. Never. He repeated those words over and over again. Not knowing that one promise would slowly destroy the boy his father had raised. His mother noticed the change almost immediately. Tunde stopped playing football with other children. Stopped attending village festivals. Stopped chasing butterflies or climbing mango trees. Every spare moment became another opportunity to study. If there was no kerosene for the lantern, he read under the moonlight. If rain leaked through the roof, he shifted his books and continued reading. Teachers soon began calling him a professor. Not because he was the smartest, but because he refused to give up. Scholarships followed. Then university. Medical school. One success opened the door to another. Until eventually, Dr. Tunde Afolayan became one of the most respected surgeons in Nigeria. People called his story inspiring. And truly, it was. But success has a way of testing people differently. For some, success reveals character. For others, it changes it. Somewhere along the journey, Ton stopped seeing poor people as people. Instead, he saw reminders of the life he had escaped. Every torn shirt reminded him of childhood. Every desperate face reminded him of helplessness. Every unpaid hospital bill reminded him of his father's death. He convinced himself of something dangerous. If I survived, they should survive too. If I fought my way out, they should fight theirs. He never stopped to ask one question. What if some people had already fought and simply lost? There was only one person in the world capable of melting the ice around his heart. His daughter, little Amara. The moment she was born, doctors joked that the stunned Dr. Ton had suddenly forgotten how to frown. Around her, he laughed freely, played silly games, even sang songs completely off-key just to make her giggle. Every Saturday belonged to her. No meetings, no surgeries, no business calls. Just Daddy and Amara. Sometimes they visited bookstores. Sometimes they went for ice cream. And whenever Evelyn wasn't looking, he bought roasted corn from roadside sellers because Amara loved it. Daddy, she asked one afternoon while they sat on a park bench. Were you poor when you were little? Ton smiled softly. Very poor. Did people help you? The smile faded. A shadow crossed his face. No. They didn't. Amara thought quietly for a moment. Then asked the question only a child could ask. So, if nobody helped you, why don't you help poor people now? Ton looked away. He wasn't expecting that. Children have a way of asking simple questions that adults spend years trying to avoid. He forced a small laugh. You're too young to understand. But Mommy says doctors help sick people. He kissed her forehead gently. One day you'll understand. The little girl frowned. Somehow, she wasn't convinced. And neither. If he was being honest with himself. Was he? That evening, as Ton watched his daughter sleep peacefully, he couldn't explain why her question refused to leave his mind. Perhaps because somewhere beneath the expensive suits, beyond the wealth, beyond the pride, the frightened little village boy still existed. Quietly waiting, quietly hurting, quietly hoping someone would one day heal the wound that money never could. But before that healing could happen, life was preparing a test that would shake Dr. Ton to the very core. A test that no medical degree, no amount of influence, and no fortune in the bank could help him pass. Fireside family. There is something special about children. They don't care whether you're rich or poor. They don't judge people by the clothes they wear or the cars they drive. They simply love. Perhaps that's why many times God uses the smallest voices to speak the biggest truths. But sadly, adults don't always listen. If there was one place where Dr. Ton forgot he was the feared owner of LifeSpring Specialist Hospital, it was his home. The moment he stepped through those gates, his title disappeared. To one little girl, he wasn't the famous surgeon everyone admired. He was simply Daddy. And that was the title he loved the most. The moment Amara heard the sound of his car pulling into the compound every evening, she would run barefoot across the sitting room. Daddy is home. Before the driver could even open the door, she was already outside, laughing, jumping into his arms. No matter how stressful his day had been, the moment he carried Amara, the tension disappeared from his face. You've grown heavier again. I didn't grow heavier. She laughed. You just became weaker. Ton pretended to be offended. Oh really? So you think your father is old now? Amara nodded proudly. Very old. He burst into laughter. then chased her around the compound while Evelyn stood on the balcony smiling. Whenever she saw moments like this, she remembered the young man she had fallen in love with. Kind, patient, gentle. She often wondered where that version of Ton disappeared to whenever he wore his white coat. One Saturday morning, father and daughter visited a small bookstore. It had become their little tradition. Amora loved storybooks. She could spend hours reading about brave children, talking animals and magical kingdoms. As they stepped outside carrying a bag full of books, a little boy around her age approached them. His clothes were faded. His slippers were worn out. He stretched out a trembling hand. "Uncle, I'm hungry. Please, can you help me buy food?" Ton didn't even stop walking. "I don't give money on the streets." The boy lowered his hand quietly. Amara turned around. She looked at the little boy, then at her father. Without saying anything, she opened her backpack, removed the meat pie Ton had bought for her, and walked back. "Here." The little boy stared at her. "For me." She smiled. "My daddy says food tastes better when people share." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you." As they entered the car, Ton looked at her. "But now you'll be hungry." Amara shrugged. "He looked hungrier than me." Ton looked out the window. For some reason, his daughter's simple act unsettled him. That evening at dinner, Evelyn served jollof rice and grilled fish. The family laughed as Amara excitedly described the books she had bought. Then suddenly, she became quiet. "Daddy." "Yes, princess." "Can I ask you something?" "You can ask me anything." She looked down at her plate. "Do poor people deserve to live?" The spoon slipped from Evelyn's hand. The dining room became silent. Ton stared at his daughter. "Why would you ask that?" She answered innocently. "Because last week, I heard two nurses talking. They said a little boy died because his mommy didn't have enough money." Ton's jaw tightened. Evelyn slowly looked at her husband. Amara continued. "Was that true?" Nobody answered. The silence itself became an answer. The little girl looked at her father. "I thought doctors were supposed to save people first and ask questions later." Ton forced a smile. "The world isn't always that simple. But shouldn't it be?" Again. Another question. Simple. Honest. Impossible to answer. Evelyn reached for Amora's hand. "Finish your food, sweetheart." The little girl nodded. But Ton hardly touched his own meal after that. Later that night, Evelyn found him standing alone on the balcony. The city lights stretched into the distance. "What are you thinking about?" He sighed. "Our daughter asks too many questions." Evelyn smiled gently. "No. She asks the right questions." He remained silent. She stepped beside him. "Ton, I've wanted to ask you something for a long time." He looked at her. "Are you happy?" The question surprised him. "What do you mean?" "You have the hospital. You have respect. You have wealth. You have us." She paused. "So why does it always feel like you're still fighting someone?" Ton didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was, he knew exactly who he was fighting. Poverty. Even though it had stopped chasing him years ago, he was still running. Meanwhile, inside Life Spring Specialist Hospital, Nurse Ada was quietly doing what she always did. A young security guard rushed into the nurse's station. "Sister Ada, there's an elderly man outside. His wife is very sick. They don't have enough money." Ada closed the patient's file in front of her. "Where are they?" They are waiting near the emergency entrance. She hurried outside. An old man sat on a wooden bench, supporting his unconscious wife. His hands trembled as he spoke. My pension hasn't entered. I've begged everywhere. Please, help my wife. Ada looked at the woman. Her breathing was weak. Every second mattered. Without hesitation, she turned to one of the junior nurses. Take her inside. I'll handle the paperwork. But Dr. turned. I said take her inside. The young nurse nodded. Minutes later, treatment had begun. Ada quietly reached into her handbag, pulled out her ATM card, and paid the initial deposit herself. No one was supposed to know. She had done it before. Many times. To her, a doctor's first duty wasn't to a policy. It was to a life. She only prayed Dr. Ton would never find out. Because if he did, someone's job would be on the line. And as fate would have it, that secret wasn't going to stay hidden for much longer. Sometimes, the people who quietly do the right thing become the very people who expose those doing the wrong thing. And before another week passed, life was about to knock on Dr. Ton's own front door. Not as a patient, not as a businessman, but as a father desperately praying for a miracle. That morning, they had planned to visit the cinema before stopping at Amora's favorite restaurant for lunch. But just as they were about to leave, his phone rang. He looked at the screen and sighed. Evelyn folded her arms. Don't tell me you're answering it. It's the minister. It will only take a minute. Amora pouted dramatically. Daddy, you promised. Ton smiled and pinched her cheeks gently. I know, princess. I'll be back before you count to 100. She laughed. You always say that. I mean it this time. He kissed her forehead and hurried into his study. 1 minute became 10. 10 became 30. By the time he returned, Amara was asleep on the sofa, hugging the teddy bear he had bought her on her last birthday. Evelyn looked at him without saying a word. I know. I'm sorry. She sighed. She'll understand. Evelyn shook her head gently. No, Ton. Children understand disappointment. They just forgive faster than adults. Those words lingered in his mind. To make up for it, he cancelled every appointment for the following Saturday. No interruptions, he told his secretary. No calls. No meetings. No excuses. He was determined to keep his promise. And he did. The following Saturday was perfect. They visited a bookstore. Bought more storybooks than Amora could carry. Shared roasted corn from a roadside woman. Took silly pictures together. For hours. Dr. Ton forgot about the hospital. Forgot about money. Forgot about policies. He was simply a father. As they drove home that evening, Amora rested her head against his shoulder. Daddy. I wish every day could be Saturday. He smiled. So do I. Neither of them knew how precious that simple conversation would soon become. Monday arrived. Life returned to normal. Amora kissed her parents goodbye before boarding her school bus. Bye, Daddy. Study hard. I always do. She laughed as the bus drove away. Ton watched until it disappeared around the corner. It was something he did every morning. He didn't know that would be the last time he would see her smiling for many days. The day passed quickly. Surgeries. Meetings. Paperwork. A television interview. Just after 4 p.m. Evelyn called. Ton. Has Amora reached home? He glanced at his watch. Not yet. No. Maybe traffic. I'll call the school. He wasn't worried. Not yet. Port Harcourt traffic could be unpredictable. 20 minutes later, his phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Evelyn. It was an unfamiliar number. Hello. The voice on the other end was shaking. Is this Dr. Tunde Afolayan? Yes. I'm calling from the police. His heart skipped. There has been an accident involving your daughter's school bus. Everything around him suddenly became silent. The files on his desk. The air conditioner. The voices outside his office. It was as though the world had stopped breathing. What did you say? The east-west road. A truck lost control because of the rain. We are taking the children to different hospitals. For the first time in years. Dr. Tunde's hands began to tremble. He didn't remember leaving his office. He didn't remember getting into his car. He only remembered praying. Over and over again. God. Not my daughter. Please. Not my daughter. His driver had never seen him like that before. The confident doctor who always remained calm during the most complicated surgeries was now shaking like a leaf as they approached the accident scene. The flashing blue lights became visible. Police vehicles. Ambulances. Crowds. Twisted metal. Broken glass scattered across the wet road. Parents screaming the names of their children. Rescue workers running from one vehicle to another. Tunde jumped out before the car stopped completely. Amora! He shouted. Amora! No answer. He searched frantically among the stretchers. Then, he saw her. She lay unconscious. Her school uniform was stained with blood. A paramedic was pressing bandages against her side. For a moment, Tunde couldn't move. His knees weakened. His daughter. His little girl. The one who loved storybooks. The one who asked innocent questions. The one who believed every doctor should save every life. She looked so small. So helpless. Daddy. One of the paramedics recognized him. We are taking her to your hospital. Tunde rushed to her side. He held her tiny hand. It felt cold. Far colder than it should have. Princess. Daddy is here. You'll be okay. You hear me? You'll be okay. But Amora didn't answer. The ambulance door slammed shut. Sirens screamed into the evening. And as the vehicle sped toward LifeSpring Specialist Hospital, Dr. Tunde sat beside his unconscious daughter. Not as one of the country's finest surgeons. Not as a wealthy hospital owner. Not as a respected public figure. But as a terrified father. Watching the most precious person in his life slip further and further away. Little did he know. The greatest battle of his life wasn't waiting inside the operating theater. It was waiting inside his own heart. Because before this night was over, the same helplessness he had forced countless families to endure would become his own reality.